just about set now. This is the 1989 Australian Championship, and the field is Gary Rush going from position 1, driving a Gambler. Position 2, held down by Brett Lacey, also a Gambler race car. Max Dumsney, sponsored by Valvoline, driving an OTR from position number 3. Position 4, held down by Bob Tunks. Position number 5, George Tatnall, running for Winfield and a Gambler race car. Position 6, Dennis Farr, sponsored by Bars Leaks and driving a Gambler. Going from position 7 is Nipper Lacey, also Gambler mounted and sponsored by Lacey's Bodyworks. Position number 8, former national champion Ron Cricky, driving a Murphy car. Position 9, Ian Lewis, also Gambler. Car number 27, going from position number 10, the driver Wayne Bunker, and it's an OTR. Position 11, Phil Coates from Tasmania, running for Dunbar Racing, also an OTR race car. Position 12, held down by John Kelly in a Tognotti. Position number 13, held by Brooke Tatnall, Gambler mounted, sponsored by Shell and Australian Airlines. The driver of car number 10, Peter Catastri, it's a Gambler car, sponsored by Freedom Homes, starting from position number 14. Position number 15, the driver, Colin Farr, sponsored by Lander Toyota, car number 9, a Gambler race car. And the last man into tonight's running of the Australian Sprint Car Championship, the driver of car number 16 from Mount Gambier, South Australia. It's an OTR, sponsored by Bob Jane T-Marts, and Bill Barrows is the driver. So the full field set to run the 1989 Australian Sprint Car Championship, brought to you by Carrick Video from Canberra's Pepsi Powerdrome. Shouldn't be too much longer before the field is set on their way. It's a 25-lap journey, amended from 40 laps, and Gary Rush leads them down into turn number 1. Gary Rush heading through the first turn, and a jumble of cars. Ron Cricky up high there on the high line, looking for a way through on the outside of Dennis Farr. Also there too is Ian Lewis in the number 95 race car. 1 lap down, 24 laps remaining in the Australian Sprint Car Championship. There's Nipper Lacey, just ahead of him is Bob Tunks. Also through there too is Dennis Farr as the field streams down into turn number 3. There's the defending Australian Sprint Car champion. Oh, George Tatnall out of shape there, and now Bob Tunks closes up on Tatnall. Tatnall being relegated back to now position number 7 in the field. Also there Nipper Lacey as the field goes down past the pit gates into turn number 3, and Bobby Tunks now being challenged hard by George Tatnall, and further back there too is Ian Lewis, followed by Ron Cricky and Brooke Tatnall. Down into turn number 1, next one through is John Kelly. There's Nipper Lacey driving car number 16, and further ahead of him too is a jumble of cars. Meanwhile, Dennis Farr closing that gap on Nipper Lacey. Bob Tunks running 5th or 4th at the race on the racetrack, or actually 5th at this stage. There's George Tatnall, just checking the top 4 running order in fact, and it's Gary Rush from Brett Lacey. Next one through is Max Dumsney. George Tatnall placed 4th, followed by Bob Tunks in 5th position. That's the rightful top 5 order at this stage. Gary Rush the race leader, and now Rush coming up to put a lap on Bill Barrows so early in the race. Gary Rush starting to lap the slower cars at this stage, and Gary Rush with a very handy advantage in this early stage of the running of the 1989 Australian Sprint Car Championship. And I guess already we should ask, can Gary Rush make it win number 8 as Brett Lacey goes through? Not far behind Brett Lacey is George Tatnall. Also there too is Max Dumsney. Now Tatnall up into 3rd position. This is developing into a great drive from George Tatnall. Certainly had to do it hard from position number 5 already up to 3rd, and George Tatnall certainly he's not going to give in his title without a fight. Goes via the infield up on the concrete curve. George Tatnall certainly putting on a rodeo exhibition as he sets off after Max Dumsney once again. A great drive there by Max Dumsney, currently holding down 3rd position. George Tatnall is 4th, followed by Bob Tunks now lapping the slower cars. Also goes around the outside of Phil Coates. Also too Colin Farr there in contention, but further back in the field as we watch Max Dumsney stream through turn number 4, and he is now certainly giving chase to George Tatnall. Gary Rush still leading from Brett Lacey. George Tatnall there on screen at the moment, coming through turn number 4 to complete another lap. And George Tatnall certainly showing that he's not going to give in his Australian Championship without a fight. As we look now down, and Ron Cricky upside down, trouble on turn number 4. Also in there too is John Kelly. Dennis Farr involved, Brooke Tatnall and Ron Cricky upside down, and certainly, most definitely, out of contention for a repeat win. Winner of the Australian Championship at Perth Claremont Speedway in 1985, and certainly bad luck indeed for Ron Cricky who has really driven quite well over the 2 nights here at the Canberra Pepsi Powerdrome. Crash crews now just on the scene of this accident. On turn 4 also involved is Ian Lewis. Well, that's good to see Ron Quickey quite okay. Well, there's Ron Cricky back on the racetrack, and he's set to go racing once again. The car looks quite okay, the wing a little bit out of shape, however. So Ron Cricky resuming his place for a continuation of the Australian Sprint Car Championship. A little over halfway completed. Ron Cricky now slotting into his position ahead of Brooke Tatnell. But the interest, it's all at the head of the field. There's Gary Rush, the race leader, looking for win number 8. Brett Lacey in second position, and George Tatnell holding down third spot. The top 3 runners, national champions of Australian sprint car racing, and Max Dumsney in fourth, followed by Bob Tunks. So the top 5 set to go at it. Also there, Nipper Lacey. But it's been a magnificent drive from George Tatnell coming out of position number 5. And George Tatnell with it all to do from here on in, but this will give him his best opportunity to take another shot at Brett Lacey and Gary Rush with a nose-to-tail restart. Just about set to go racing once again. Rush to lead them away. Pace starting to quicken coming off turn number 4. The lights on green once again, and Gary Rush charges down into turn number 1. The leader of the 1989 Australian Sprint Car Championship looking for win number 8 as the rest of the field streams through down into turn number 3. There's Max Dumsney holding down 4th spot on the racetrack at this stage. Bob Tunks back in 5th. But this is really where the interest is as George Tatnell applies the pressure once again on Brett Lacey, battling for 2nd and 3rd. Brett Lacey in 2nd spot, and Tatnell coming once more on the inside, but Lacey still holding down a comfortable 2nd placing, but he's got plenty of work to do because he knows he's got a hard charging George Tatnell right behind. Next one through is Max Dumsney. That's the top 4 running order, and Gary Rush doing it nicely out in front. Gary Rush with a clear running track ahead of him is well clear at this stage from Brett Lacey and George Tatnell. Coming down the main straight to complete yet another lap, Gary Rush, the race leader, and certainly a man who's won more Australian sprint car titles than any other driver already, with a record that will stand the test of time in Australian speedway history, and perhaps can just make it win number 8 to put that record well beyond any chance of anyone really ever equaling that mark of 8 wins. But however, the race is not over yet. Still plenty of laps remaining as we watch Brett Lacey and George Tatnell still trying to close that gap on Brett Lacey. This has been a battle all the way through the race. Brett Lacey in 2nd position, and George Tatnell, a tremendous drive from George Tatnell, winner of this event at Adelaide Speedway Park last year, and a great performance and a great career from George Tatnell, one of the veterans of Australian speedway racing. First commenced his career in the early 60s at Sydney's Windsor Speedway driving stock cars, went on to great success in Australian speed car racing, also a winner of state sprint car titles, and of course one of the highlights of his career coming last year in Adelaide with that bicentennial win in the Australian Sprint Car Championship. But George Tatnell, with not too many more laps remaining, certainly has plenty of work to do if he hopes to retain the title, because Gary Rush is leading, and leading with plenty of style, and looks set now as he moves up on the tail of Ron Cricky, attempting to put a lap on Ron Cricky as we move into the closing stages of the Australian title. Laps Ron Cricky, and Gary Rush again with a clear track ahead of him, and now the rest of the field has to get past Ron Cricky, and this allows Gary Rush to skip clear. Brett Lacey the next one through, and this also moves George Tatnell right up on the tail once again of Brett Lacey. Lacey, however, just with a little advantage this time, coming off turn number 4 down the main straight. Not too many more laps remaining. Gary Rush still leading. Brett Lacey in 2nd spot, George Tatnell in 3rd, followed by Max Dumsney in 4th position, and tailing out in 5th spot is Bob Tunks. Gary Rush, who first won the Australian title in the late 70s, and the winner of, and we have problems up in turn number 4. 2 drivers there bringing on the yellow lights. One of them is John Kelly, just trying to pick up the other driver. Looks like it's Ian Lewis. Yes, Ian Lewis, the driver of car number 95, bringing on the yellow lights. So another nose-to-tail restart, and this presents yet another opportunity for George Tatnell. Well, there's Gary Rush, the man who, on the last occasion the Australian Sprint Car Championship was run in Canberra, in those days known as Tralee Speedway, he won the Australian Sprint Car Championship. Will history repeat itself once again, or will it be Brett Lacey? But of course the man who really wants to win it probably more than anybody else is George Tatnell, and he's currently in third position. Gary Rush, as I say, the winner of 7 Australian titles, coming off turn 4, lights on green once more, and Gary Rush, not too many more laps remaining in the Australian title. George Tatnell will have to really do something desperate in these remaining laps. Nipper Lacey up high. Brooke Tatnell moves through on the inside to pick up one more placing in the field. Gary Rush still leading, and now George Tatnell's moved into second position with a pass on Brett Lacey, and now it's really reached an interesting stage in the Australian title, right down to the wire. Only several laps remaining, and here it is, the two Winfield cars running 1 and 2. Gary Rush leading and George Tatnell in second position, and we said he wasn't going to give up his title as John Kelly spins and brings on the yellow lights. John Kelly round in turn number 2, bringing on the yellow lights, and really what it becomes now is something like only 2 laps remaining. It's a 2-lap match race between Gary Rush and George Tatnell for the Australian Sprint Car Championship. So here it is, 2 laps remaining, as by our reckoning just 2 laps to go, 2 laps away from the final results in the Australian title. Will it be Gary Rush? But certainly George Tatnell. It's a 2-lap match race. George Tatnell in second position. There's no second chances from here on in. George Tatnell must make his passing move and make it very, very quickly. Gary Rush with an Ivan Walker prepared race engine. George Tatnell running an engine prepared by Alan Felsch. Alan Felsch and Ivan Walker, 2 of the most respected engine builders in Australian sprint car racing, and it's right down to the wire now with the 2 Winfield cars, everything on the line. Gary Rush, who commenced his incredible winning sequence in the Australian Sprint Car Championship in the decade of the 70s, continues to be one of the all-time stars of Australian sprint car racing as we move towards the end of the decade of the 80s, as the lights turn to green once more and Gary Rush picks up the pace. George Tatnell giving it everything, giving it his best shot, but Gary Rush has skipped clear, and it's Gary Rush leading down the back straightaway and moving away from George Tatnell down into turn number 3. Gary Rush leading a little over now, just 1 lap remaining from victory in the Australian Sprint Car Championship, and Gary Rush sets off on his final lap. Let's follow him around the Canberra's Pepsi Powerdrome, down past the pit gates, lining up on turn number 3, a quarter a lap away from victory, coming off turn number 4 to take victory in the Australian Sprint Car Championship for 1989. Gary Rush, the race winner. George Tatnell in second spot, followed across the line by Brett Lacey in 5th position, and the next one through was Max Dumsday coming home 4th, followed by Bob Tunks in 5th, and I think you'll find Dennis Farr taking the 6th position. So a great victory there to Gary Rush. Equally, certainly much of the praise and credit for this Australian Championship final, making it so memorable, was the performance by George Tatnell, but there's really no taking it away from the winner, Gary Rush. A magnificent drive.
Good one, Max. That was a great drive. And Jack Holt presents you with what must be the biggest sash that I've ever seen for finishing 4th in the Australian Sprint Car title. Max, that was tough stuff out there. I guess, well, I can't say, I haven't been everywhere that you've raced, but that must have been one of the hardest 2 nights racing that you've put in for a long while.
Yeah, it was pretty well. The track turned out not being too bad for the feature, so it come through alright, but Gary certainly did the job again. Congratulations to him, and I'd just like to thank our sponsors, Valvoline, for sponsoring us this year, and all the guys working on the car.
Max, you will recall that I did promise you that we'd have a good track for the feature, didn't you?
Yeah.
And we did. Ladies and gentlemen, Max Dumsday from Victoria, 4th place in the Australian Sprint Car car title tonight, and a great drive by the youngster from Victoria, and I'm sure that all of his crew will be more than happy with his performance. Nobody's going to say that he didn't try his hardest tonight. Third place in the Australian Sprint Car Championship tonight went to Ray Lacey. I keep calling him Ray, you see. Brett Lacey, ladies and gentlemen. One day he's going to move out from under the shadow of his dad. I think he might have just done it tonight. Brett, congratulations, that was a great drive. Come around here so that Ricky can pick up all the action on the video camera. And Jack Hogg has a trophy to present to you. Third place in the Australian Sprint Car Championship and a sash to go along with it. Brett, congratulations, that was a great drive. Again, I said to Max that must have been one of the toughest ones that he's done for a while, and I think you probably had to do it pretty tough too.
Well, I don't think so. I don't agree with that. It wasn't a hard race. It was, you know, it's one of those things where you kept on going around, and I made one little blue and George got me. But thanks to the Powerdrome anyway. Thanks to my sponsors, Partridge Steel, and the Regal Park Motel in North Adelaide. A big thank you to my pit crew. We've had a hard season this year. We've had a lot of breakdowns, and they've done a hell of a job. So thanks all you guys. Thanks very much. To Gary too as well.
Ladies and gentlemen, Brett Lacey, third place in the Australian Sprint Car Championship, and they don't come much better than that. A well-deserved third place from Brett, and he moves straight across to congratulate Gary, and that's the way these guys are. They give no quarter and they ask none on the track, but when the racing's over, they're the best of friends. Second place in the title, and I guess a disappointment for him, not defending his title and winning back-to-back titles, but I'm sure that George won't be disappointed with the second place. Ladies and gentlemen, second place in the 1989 Australian Sprint Car Championship for Winfield Racing, George Tapp. Thank you, that's what we like to hear. Congratulations, George, and thanks for hanging in there with us like all of the rest of the drivers did. It was a tough weekend, wasn't it?
That's the way it goes. You know, we really expect some bad weekends for Speedway, and Peter and the boys have had a really headache this weekend. But as long as they learn something out of it, but it's, we just hope the public bears with them on these sorts of things, because there's nothing we can do about the elements with Speedway are very harsh. And when you think you've got everything under control, you know, you get a screw up like Peter and that had last night. But anyway, congratulations, Pete. Through all the adversity, they come through pretty good.
And George, thanks for your help and the help of the other drivers, particularly in terms of advice about you know, how to get the track right back again, because in the end it didn't turn out to be too bad a surface for the feature after all.
No, the track came out quite good. It's unfortunately there wasn't too many passing lines on it, but you know, that's just the way it goes. But it's the same for everybody, and we just hope the people out there enjoyed the race. And congratulations to Gary. He's a well-worthy winner of it, and you know, to all the other boys that competed in the race, you know, congratulate them too on the finish. But I'd like to thank, first of all, Joe, my brother, who's towed us around, been with us for a long time, keeps going crook on us. Alan Felsh, the engine man at Wrench, who is just superb. He's got the best engines in the country. I know we finished second tonight, but we had to pass a few cars to do it. Alan, thanks very much for the beautiful engine and the work that you've done. Paul, Michael, and all the boys, and my wife and daughters for hanging in there with us. Especially Winfield, who's been with us for 16 years. Australian Airlines, Shell, and to all you people out there, thanks very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, second place in the sprint car title, ever the gentleman, George Tappner, and I'm sure he won't be disappointed with that. He's been there and done that, and he knows the ups and downs of Speedway. Sometimes you win, sometimes you don't. Tonight he didn't, but second place is better than everybody else in the field, except the man who won the 1989 Australian Sprint Car Champion. Ladies and gentlemen, the Master Blaster, Gary Rush. A standing ovation and well worth it. Gary, congratulations. The last time that we were here, it was my brother who was interviewing you after your win in 1982, and it's been a thrill for me to be able to call this title and to be able to come down here and do exactly the same thing. Gary, that was brilliant. Words fail me. What have you got to say?
Well, you know, I'm very happy. I know all my crew's very happy, and you know, we're out there, and Johnny Barrett, you know, he's the man behind me, and you know, John should be here. Come over, John. This man dedicates his life to my race car, and I have to thank him very much.
John, of course, gave up a very, very successful career as a sedan car driver to work as your crew. and to prepare your car and everything else like that. And I don't think that he ever really got the recognition that he deserved for that. And Gary, I'm delighted that you called him up here tonight, because in fact I mentioned his name as we wrapped up here tonight, and it's great that you called him up here, ladies and gentlemen. John Barrett really deserves a big hand, because he's the secret behind Gary Rush's success. There's no risk about that. John, congratulations too, mate. Glad you can share the mode with us. Ladies and gentlemen, I ask Jack Hogg to present the trophy for the 1989 Australian Sprint Car Champion to Gary Rush from New South Wales, and the sash to go with it. And 8 times has Gary visited the winner's circle, 8 times has he picked up the Australian Championship, and truly he stands unequalled in Australian Speedway as the greatest. I know he wouldn't say that, but I'm entitled to say that, and I'm going to, and I know you'll agree with me. Gary, you've got some people you want to thank, of course.
Yes, I'd like to thank my sponsors, Winfield and Ivan Walker. He builds my engines, he owns them, and without him, I couldn't be here as well. But really the people I have to thank is the promotion. They went through a lot of trouble over the last couple of nights, and they worked very, very hard, and all the officials, and they've given us a racetrack finally to swerve with an Australian title. Thank you again, boys. Thanks a lot. But really the people I'd like to thank is all those people standing on the hill. They've been there for the last 2 nights, and really they've stayed here till, what time is it? 25 to 2, and I'd really like to thank you all for coming, and I hope to see you all again one day. Thank you.